welcome to Tesla, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just playing, man. I already drank my tea. It's pretty good. But that's how I drink it, homie, with the pinky up. Because I'm fancy, right? That's how you got to do it, son. But anyways, man, you guys know that Hikaru Nakamura played Wesley So today in their match. They are fighting to see who is the grand champion of the world. Nah, I'm playing. But anyway, this is actually a really nice game they played today. Just as always, as these players play each other, it's a roller coaster. All of my people in the Philippines, I would say mabuhay. It is afternoon now, so magandang hapon. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we got for this game. So we got to move C4, and we had to move E5. Now, a majority of C4 openings do transpose over into D4 openings. So E5 is just one of the 7 ways that you can play to make for sure that it doesn't really transpose. Because usually when you have like a D4 opening, there's a lot of moves where you'll play C4 too. And so basically, you know, if somebody's more of a D4 player, sometimes they might like play C4 just to kind of throw you off. Kind of like Bobby Fischer did in one of his world championship matches, games. But we do see the move E5. We got knight to C3, knight to F6, knight to F3, knight to C6, E4. So we do have what is known as the English opening 4 knights, the Nimzowitsch variation. And there's another feature that I'll be talking about in just a second. We got bishop to B4 and we have D3. So we have a Maroxy bind going on here in the center of the board, which is indicative of these 2 pawns being pushed forward, which does happen a lot in, you know, D4 openings. Of course, this pawn isn't back here in a D4 opening, but it very rarely happens in a C4 situation. Sometimes when you're playing against a Sicilian, you might see it or something like that, but you really don't want D5 to come. So usually black ends up playing a D6 situation, which is actually what we see in this game. And that's right now D6. We do see D6, A3, bishop goes back to C5. We got B4, bishop back to B6. And you know what? This D6 move actually comes very much in handy. Because if not, then you would just be trapping the bishop with C5 and then Hikaru would shake hands and go home. So we don't see that, but we do see the move knight to A4, bishop goes to G4, bishop goes to E2, bishop takes F3, bishop takes F3, knight goes down to D4. And basically, they just have the ability to take this bishop whenever they want because it's not going anywhere where a knight can't capture it. Of course, as you guys can see, any of these squares, a knight can just snap it off the board. You do see knight taking B6, pawn taking B6, castles, queen to D7. That's why you see that Wesley So is not in a hurry to capture it because it's like, bro, I can capture it whenever I want. Bishop to B2, knight takes F3, queen takes F3. We got castles by black. Queen goes back to E2. You know, we are very interested in opening not only this file, but this diagonal as well. Right now, the bishop is kind of like, you know, kind of hemmed in by this pawn. So if we can get capture such as this, then you guys see that that diagonal is open. But we do see the novelty of the game, which is rook F to E8. And we're trying to put a little bit of pressure down this in case we do see some openings. You know, you might have a little bit of weaknesses going on. So we do see the move H4, like I said. We got B5. So in black's position, they're pretty much doing everything great. White has a really nice position too, except they do want to try to get this bishop, you know, like more operational at some point. Can I draw an arrow, son? But one of the weaknesses that black has are these double pawns. So, I mean, why not get rid of it post-haste? It's a little phrase that I learned when I was in school, post-haste, man. It was like, yeah, interesting. Anyways, so we are threatening to capture on C4. So we do see the counter move C5. Queen goes to E6. We got rook A to C1. And I'm saying this is when it starts to get kind of dicey. We got the move C6. Pawn takes D6. And we don't see the immediate recapture because black is like, bro, you can't protect that pawn anyway. I'm going to take it whenever I want. So the knight goes back to D7. We got queen over to F2. We got F6. So you see all this tension building in the center of the board. We got the move D4. Pawn takes F4. And then instead of taking back immediately, which you can do, the very accurate E5 comes into the position. And you see this bishop is starting to kind of get opened up. You know, these pawns have kind of started to clear out of the center of the board. So that is definitely, you know, a thing that white wanted to do. So pawn takes E5, pawn takes E5, knight takes E5, and then pin it immediately. Rook C to E1, and you kind of have to do something about this because, you know, you are taking this knight next move. The queen hangs around. So we do see queen down to D5. We got queen over to E2. And we are prepared to sacrifice our queen, which is what we see in the game. Knight to C4. We got queen takes, rook takes, queen takes with check. The king goes down to F7. Only move. and rook to e7. And would you believe that this position says triple zeros? Okay, the thing about it is, if you make the wrong move, then like you're losing. Like that's the thing. It's like it goes from triple zeros to plus 64.5 for white, and then mating in 4. So let's look at king to g8 as like the alternative move, right? Well, the problem is you have a rook takes g7, and then the king has to slide over to h8, or it doesn't have to. But if it does slide over here, you got a rook taking here, and I mean there really isn't a whole lot of places that you can go. So you definitely don't want to get into that. So we don't see that. We see king down to g6 because Wesley so is gangster. Both of these guys are gangsters. They're like, man, I'm not doing all of that dumb stuff, bro. But we do still allow the rook to take on g7 with check, but it's a much different situation because the king slides the rook to h6. We got bishop down to a1 because it was attacked on b2. Knight goes to e3, and crazy enough, the #1 move in this position that Hikaru finds is h4. Like, bro, I think majority of people are going to be like, bro, my rook is attacked. I gotta move the rook somewhere, homie. Which you can actually move it, take on f4, which, I mean, is very similar to the situation. But, I mean, anyway, h4 is a really nice find. It's the strongest move in the position. Anytime you find the strongest move in the position, it's always like a hooray moment. At least it is for me. I don't know about y'all. The queen does go down to d3. Now, some of you guys might be wondering. Okay, I'm looking at the position. I see that I can't checkmate here because, I mean, this rook is protecting, right? But, I mean, can't I win the exchange going down and taking on f1? Well, the thing about it is, if you do this, this is actually losing. To go down and take on f1, you see the bar goes crazy, right? This is the problem. White can actually set up a checkmate threat with a rook to g5. It's attacking the queen. It's also threatening bishop to g7 checkmate if the queen doesn't go somewhere that defends. But even if the queen does go somewhere to defend, the problem is you have to give up the queen to save the game. So if you do something like queen takes d6, like, bro, I got a pawn. No, you didn't. I checkmated you. So you got to watch out. So going back in this position here, the queen actually has to go to f7. You're going to do the check on g7. The queen's going to take, the rook's going to take, the king's going to take. And the most important feature of this position is d7. The king is outside the square of the pawn, which for those of you that have watched my videos or that know in-game stuff like that, you know that this square of this pawn is literally like this, right? And especially when you go to this square, this is the square of this pawn. The king cannot step in that square. If it is black to move, black can obviously go here, and then it's in time to save the pawn. But you can't do that. So that is why that is not playable. So these are things that Hikaru are he's calculating. So we go back to the position that we had. We got h4. The queen goes down to d3 in this position. Rook takes f4 now. Queen goes down to d1. You are having to part with your bishop, to save your 2 rooks. The king goes up to f2. Queen takes a1. You got rook down to g5. Knight goes back to d5. You got d7. Super getting close to queening, but the queen is just in time on h8. That's like literally the only way you can say that. Rook goes to e4. Queen goes to f6 with check. We got king down to g1. Queen goes over to d6. And now you have gotten in a position where you can't save this pawn anymore. So we do see the queening of the pawn because, like, might as well, I'm throwing it away anyway. Queen takes on d8. Rook goes up to e6 with check. Knight goes back to f6, pinning itself. And then we have king up to h2. Now, you guys see the bar going kind of crazy. Wesley So has a completely winning move in this position. Not only a winning move, but like a winning move that needs a very specific follow-up move. If you want to go ahead and pause the video and try to guess what that initial move is, go ahead and do so. Oh, okay. All right. So I think that's enough time. So for those of you that do chess puzzles or who play games or who have seen any of my videos, a majority of people out there, I mean, when you're looking at chess videos, is going to tell you when you're playing your own game, when you're playing puzzles and you're doing all this, the first thing you should look for is a check. And that's the thing. The only check that we have on the board is queen to c7. Oh, actually, no, there's another check. There's queen to b8, which actually does a very similar job. But, I mean, it's not quite as good. But we do have queen to c7 check is the absolute winner in the position. After queen to c7, you have like a really huge question that you need to ask yourself. Do I move the g-pawn or do I go back with my king? The problem is one of them completely loses. You really have to go G3, and then you would end up with this type of a setup here, and this is just completely winning for black. It gets really deep, so we're not going to go into it all the way. But if you go back after queen to c7, if you said I'm just going to escape my king, right? Well, you would be absolutely losing after the queen comes down to f4, and you are threatening this pawn, so you are going to have to move the g pawn somewhere. After this pawn goes to g4, you would be looking at queen to d4. And what you're seeing with this position is the infiltration of the queen into the black position, and you're moving the king out into the open, which is where you want it to be. The queen goes down to b2 with check. King goes to f3. You got queen to b3 with check. And then the only move, rook to e3, because you were forking the pieces. And then after the queen goes to c4, you got rook up to e7. Queen down to f1. And like I said, the queen is literally in there. And, I mean, there's really not a whole lot that you can do. If you decide to go this way, I mean, you're going to be losing your rook to check. So you have to go this way. And, you know, you're starting to get really iffy with your piece placement. So it puts a lot of pressure on you, especially with a low time game. But like I said, we did see the move queen to d4. And as you guys guessed it, triple zeros again. But you do have to find some specific moves in this position, though. So it's not like it's just automatically drawn. The king comes up to g3. Now, this was the first key move that Hikaru found in the position. Like I said, it wasn't just obvious. So he latched on to the fact that you can't really move the g-pawn successfully because you're going to be looking at a bunch of checks. So he did at least grasp that concept, and this led to him being able to like hold the position to triple zeros, which is what everything says. We got the move b6, rook takes c6. We got queen down to e3, king to h2, queen to f4 with check. The king goes up to h3. We got queen down to f1, rook to e6. What we also have is the ability for the king to just basically just kind of go back and forth. And not get into any type of open situation, which is what moving the g-pawn was going to allow. So we do see queen to f2, rook goes to c6, we see queen to e3 with check, the king goes back down to h2, queen to d4, king to g3. And this was actually something they were talking about on the broadcast. They were like, oh man, it would be so cool if, you know, Wesley So just sacrificed his queen and made a stalemate. They were talking about queen to f3 would produce a stalemate, because as you notice, you know, black has all of its pieces unable to move. I mean, this rook is pinning down this knight, and this king can't go anywhere, obviously. This pawn can't push, and these pawns can't push. So, I mean, black is stalemated if not for the queen. So what he decides to do, which, I mean, this is going to be completely drawn because they're just going to repeat moves. He kind of goes out with a bang and goes queen takes h4 with check, and then the king takes, and this is your stalemate that we were talking about a second ago. So they kind of find a little funny way to end the game, which was kind of pleasing because everybody was like, do it, do it. And I mean, it's funny. But I mean, man, both players, I mean, it was doing really good. I mean, Wesley So definitely had some chances here. But man, I tell you what, man, man, he must like Hikaru a lot because he really be letting him off the hook hard. But anyways, man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time.